Peace, family. You tapped into the DOA TBM. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content and updates. This one's so groovy, baby. Yeah, no problem, man. Yeah, we sound a lot cleaner and stuff now, so we can knock it out like this, and you get to tell your story this way. We won't be able to bring the visual, but they can still hear the audio, and it gives us an introduction for next time.
Okay, I got you. So we'll do the this interview on audio, and then maybe we'll do the video on the next go round.
Yeah.
Okay, sounds good.
So maybe we'll start out with just a little bit of an introduction on yourself, and then we'll get into some of your stories. So
okay. Yes, my name is Darren Cubie. I'm Credo Jones' son from the music group The Shy Lights. I was born in 1976, December the 20th, by my father, Credo Jones from the Shy Lights. He's the baritone singer for the music group The Shy Lights, best known for Have You Seen Her and Oh Girl, Letters to Myself, etc., and Power to the People. My mother, which was his wife, who married my dad in around 1978, following his divorce from his ex-wife, Ruby Jones, in 1975. And my dad and mother, Credo Jones, my dad and my mom, Deborah Jones, they had me and my two sisters, Trinell Jones and Tamiko Cubie. All three of us are by our father, Credo Jones, and our mother, Deborah Jones.
Okay.
On the site.
So did you spend much time around the Shy Lights and Credo Jones when you was younger, and if so, what was that experience like?
Well, yes, I did spend time around my dad, of course. It was a very interesting experience as far as being able to be around other celebrities, because my father was always just my father. I felt like I was able to be with my dad and my mother and two sisters together, and when we would go out to stores or go out eating or something, people would kind of come up to my father and ask for autographs. And my father had a tendency to give $100 bills to people and autograph the $100 bill that he would give to people as almost like a souvenir. That I would see him do that quite a bit with other people that he actually fans that were the fans of my dad and his music group, The Shy Lights. I felt pretty happy that my father was so generous, and he would basically. I remember one time a guy came up and a lady who said that they didn't have food at home or something like this, and asked him was he the singer of The Shy Lights, and was he in The Shy Lights. My father said yes, so my father broke out $1,000 and gave it to her. So I remember another occasion, my father was going on a world tour concert with The Shy Lights and the Jackson 5, and Michael Jackson and Jermaine Tito, Jackie, and Marlon Jackson came over with Joe Jackson and the Shy Lights, Eugene Records, Robert Lester, and Marshall Thompson to pick up my father for the concert, world tour concert in Europe. I think it was called I don't quote me. I think I can't remember exactly. I think it was I can't remember the exact name of it, but it was a major concert in 1981-82, and I got a chance to meet the Jacksons and Michael Jackson then. So I due to my father being one of the Shy Lights, I was able to meet people like Prince. I played basketball with Prince one time. I met Michael Jackson. Once I turned about 21, I was able to talk to Michael Jackson one-on-one. He came to talk to me about, I'd say 3-4 times on 4 or 5 time occasions or so. I spoke to him personally, and I met Shaka Khan, and let's see, people like Evander Holyfield I talked to after the Mike Tyson fight. My mom contacted him. So I was able to speak to, quite a few different other celebrities. Kanye West, I was able to meet him, and Oprah Winfrey's staff, Gayle King, and her boyfriend, Stedman, etc. So I was able to kind of see several celebrities and meet different types of celebrities because of my mother's marriage to my dad, and my dad being my father. So my mom and dad would stay in contact with quite a few different celebrities from time to time. But actually, I was actually raised up in somewhat of a working class environment. It wasn't a rich environment. My dad didn't get money until after the concerts that he did, and the biggest amount that I've seen him receive while he was with us was about $5 million, and that was from the World Tour concert with the Jacksons.
Oh wow, okay. And I mean, one of the things that you just mentioned as well was your father's generosity and stuff, which is definitely commendable. And we hear that, you know, a lot of artists from yesteryear, where we say the older generations were, you know, some of them were a lot more generous and stuff, and giving in their nature. With that being said, you know, we've seen like the music business go on to be exposed for unscrupulous tactics when it comes to exploitation and stuff of artists. And you know, some would argue the business was always sort of built under that foundation. In one aspect, you've had artists and creatives who, you know, have wanted to give music and something to the world, and may not have been that privy to all the functionalities of the recording business. And then, you know, as the careers progress, you know, they get a bit more versed and knowledge about it. You know, in your time around and in your experience, did you feel that, you know, the music business was fair in how it treated your father and family?
Okay, good question. No, I don't think that the music business, the music industry did not treat my father fairly at all, because of, in my opinion, because of the fact he was an African American person, and the Shylights and my dad didn't never receive royalties until after he died into 1994. The only money that the Shylights received during the time he was alive was just artists performing artists salaries that they would receive for performing each concert. So they got what you call performing artists payments from the concerts that they received, but they did not receive royalties. In fact, one time, even though my father signed a 25% contract for all the gross royalties along with the Shylights, who all had a 25% gross royalties from their contractual agreement with Brunswick Records, which, you know, Brunswick Records was known for the Jackie Wilson and other artists like Louis Armstrong and Little Richard, who were also on there, Buddy Holly. Betty, I think her name is Billie Holiday, and others. So, but this no record company was notorious for stealing and embezzling money from legendary black entertainers, and all of the artists and musicians from Brunswick actually died homeless, destitute, and in poverty. And they were actually Billie Holiday died on welfare, and most of every artist on there, I was told, died in poverty. I was told by the attorney that represents all of the artists from Brunswick Records, named Jay Ross in Chicago. He told me that one of the artists' name, I think Betty Evers, who actually died in such poverty she almost died from starvation.
Wow.
And even Robert Lester, the other fair-skinned musician from the Shylights, kind of tall, the handsome guy, he died in such poverty he couldn't afford his own funeral. And I was told that by the Shylights attorney, Jay Ross, who I've known since 1994. And he said he couldn't even afford $4,000 funeral, and he had to contribute, I think, $3,000 to the funeral of Robert Lester, because he didn't have enough money to afford his own funeral. And as you know, my father died homeless and destitute, living in Glendale, California, in such poverty he couldn't afford his own house. And the record company was very racist and refused to pay any royalties after he died, even only giving us, claiming that they were going to pay us the royalties after he died. Now, I don't know why would they wait till after my dad dies to decide they want to pay royalties, but I think they were kind of afraid that my mother, his wife, would sue the record company, and to prevent a lawsuit from my mother, being his wife, and me and my sisters being his kids, they kind of, made up royalty payments as they went along, and it started off with a $150 royalty check after the remake of Have You Seen Her by MC Hammer and other remakes by Mary J. Blige, UB40, and Paul Young, and Public Enemy, etc. Many different artists. South Central Cartel remade The Shy Lights. Quite a few. Fantasia, Chini, and my Nelly from my hometown, St. Louis, Missouri. Nelly's from St. Louis. He also remade The Shy Lights as well. So we never received any royalties from any of these remakes practically. We would always we had to actually go to the actual NBC and Fox after they refused to pay royalties. That were going to be any type of substantial legitimate payment. After getting the $150 check stating that this was a royalty from MC Hammer's remake, I suggested that my mom go to NBC and Fox and start trying to get media investigations done on this. And it led us to also go to the FBI and the IRS to start investigations and royalty theft and estate fraud by the record company Brunswick Records. And by the way, Brunswick Records also exploited Jackie Wilson's family, who Jackie Wilson wound up dying in poverty and destitution, also unable to afford his own funeral, and he couldn't even afford his own gravestone. They let my father be cremated, okay, by the state of California in the United States. He was cremated by the state of California at UCLA Medical Center because they claimed they did not know that he was a, Shy Light member, even though Los Angeles Tribune and the Los Angeles Times did an article investigation into my father's homelessness in around 1992. So all that occurred, I think, in my opinion, I think it was mainly a cover-up about so many black legendary entertainers being forced in homelessness and poverty and destitution. We were in such poverty, even when my dad was singing, when he started back singing after 1973, around 1980, Marshall and the Shy Lights contacted my dad to do the world tour concert with the Jacksons. We were so poor that I remember my dad telling my mother, well, we're out of toilet paper. I guess I got to go down to Cardinal Glenden's hospital, which was right down the street from my house, and get toilet paper, and literally try to take toilet paper out of the men's bathroom for our house.
Wow. And
it was one time it was so cold in the house. It was in dead winter time. It was like January, December sometime, and the heat was turned off, and it was so cold. I was about 4 or 5 years old. It was so cold that every time I touched my foot on the floor, it felt like my foot was like I was touching fire. My foot actually burnt like fire burning on your foot. It was so cold till we got frostbite almost in the house.
Oh wow!
Not having heat, and no matter how many times that we went to Brunswick Records and asked for help, they refused to help us. And I remember right before the concert of my dad and the Shy Lights with the Jackson 5's tour in 1982. I think it was called the Triumphant Tour. In 1982 was the Triumphant Tour or something like that. Right before that concert, the Jacksons had asked my dad for $50,000 because Joe Jackson said that he needed to get money for instruments or something like that. And we had barely been able to get the money that we needed for my dad to go do his world tour concert and to cover the hotel expenses. I think the record company had advanced the Shy Lights a few $100,000. So my dad even graciously gave Joe Jackson and the Jackson 5, $50,000 in cash. And I don't know if they gave it back. I'm assuming the Jacksons is a pretty respectable family, so I'm pretty sure they gave the $50,000 back. But I do remember Joe Jackson and I think Tito and Jermaine Jackson asking my dad for $50,000, and my dad didn't hesitate to give it to him.
Okay. I mean, it's crazy because when we even hear that example again, like you just said, just the example of the generosity of your father, and I guess of artists and a lot of black entertainers and stuff at the time, it's been well documented a lot on even Michael Jackson's generosity and the generosity of the Jackson family and stuff too. With that being said, I know you've got a bit of experience into, looking into stuff like royalties and stuff like that, because I think what a lot of people struggle with getting their head around is the concept of how these labels, so to speak, for instance, are able to generate, such revenues and profits from artists' music and works. So when we're looking at, legends like the Childlights and stuff whose music has gone on to be replicated and done by artists like Jay-Z, for instance, and stuff, there's going to be people out there wondering, okay, how is money generated and who should that money go to? So can you shed some light on that?
Well, yes. Typically, what happens is that the artist signs a contract with the record label for advancement payment. And the contractual agreement is based off of what the record company feels that they can earn and be able to actually be able to lend out to the actual artist during the actual sales, minus the sale productions of the actual music that they're doing and that they're going to be putting out for the musician itself. So they will give them what you call an artist advancement. And so the artist advancement typically is anywhere from maybe $500,000 to roughly $1 million advancement. The artists are supposed to take that money and be able to, pay their bills, pay their their wardrobe, and a lot of times in my father's cases, I remember them having to actually, the Shy Lights having to take money out of the actual advancement to be able to cover their travel expenses, because the actual record company would not cover airfare, transportation, tour buses, and so forth. They were actually expected to pay all that as well. So in order for the record company to quote unquote recoup the costs that they give to the artists, they charge them an interest rate on all of the money that they actually advanced them out of. So if they gave them $1 million advancement, they're going to be charged for transportation, food, travel, any clothing, wardrobe, any and everything that it costs to put on the actual concert itself. And they also are even charged for the actual production of the concert itself too. And they basically take deductions from the production and the actual concert, the concert advertisement, promotions, etc., etc., etc. So they actually make money from all of it. And while they're charging them for all of this, they're making like 10 times that, because I think each ticket around the time of my dad was probably around anywhere from $25 and up. And but they are supposed to be charged. They're supposed to be given like 10 cents to 25 cents. In our case, it's 25 cents per album, because we got 25% of gross royalties. So it's anywhere from 25 to 75 cents per album that's sold. But in the case of our family from the Shy Lights, and my dad, who sold along with the Shy Lights, sold over 100 million records over the past, from 1968 up until around 1994. They sold about 100 million records. And so we didn't see a fraction of that. I think my father, out of all the money that he got, the highest amount of money that he ever received was actually the actual international world concert with the Jackson 5, with the $5 million that they received. And I think the whole entire Shy Lights itself received about $30 million for all of the Shy Lights. And it's 4 original members: Eugene Marshall, my father, Creedell Jones, and Robert Lester. So all 4 members received about $5 million after the deduction of the overhead expenses, the costs for the travel, the hotel, the lodging, the food, the transportation, the productions, and the actual media advertisement. After all that was taken out, the Shylights received about $5 million each out of that $30 million that they earned.
That they generated. It's crazy, man, because when you break it down like that and we think about it's sort of like a bank in a sense where they're advancing in one aspect, but then in another aspect, like you said, they paying production costs, but then they charging artists back for those costs and all sorts of stuff. Now we've had a lot of discrepancies over the years with artists trying to renegotiate deals and stuff like that, and labels holding on to stuff. Recently, it was reported that rap group De La Soul had only just regained back certain control of some master recordings and stuff like that. So in terms of your experience and story, now it's been well documented that you've had to really fight for your rights and fight for what belongs to you and your family, by predecessory of your father and stuff. And what has that experience been like? What made you decide to take the fight on? Because sometimes when we're dealing with these big conglomerates and corporations, we know it ain't easy. And this is something that you've undertaken for some years, especially when media wasn't at a high proportion as it is right now. So
Yes. Well, as I mentioned earlier, thanks for asking that question, because that's very, very important to anybody that wants to know about the music industry, at least coming from the aspect of the son of a legendary entertainer who has a store on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. I'm happy that my dad did receive a Hollywood store on the Walk of Fame with his music group, the Shylights, this year in 2021. They made that contribution, and they did get abducted into the Hollywood Walk of Fame. But we never received not 1 cent of royalties until after my mother, and until after my dad, Creedell Jones, died. My dad did not receive any royalties. They were supposed to receive 25% on every record that they sold, but they didn't receive nothing. And then Paul Trainapole, which is the owner of Brunswick Records, his father's name, Nathan Trainapole. Nathan never paid any of his artists any royalties at all. Even they would sign contracts of like 25%, 20%, 15% royalty contractual agreements with the record label. But Brunswick Records and his owner, Nathan Trainapole, would never ever pay any of those artists anything, because they felt that because they were black, and that we're talking in 1968, when black people had just received the right to vote here in the United States. They signed a contract before black African Americans were even able to vote here in the United States. And so they really didn't feel like they had to pretty much honor any contractual agreements that they had with any of the black artists on Brunswick. Because Brunswick Records originally started as a white Jewish record company owned by MGM, and MGM Studios owned Brunswick Records originally. And what happened is they created a black side of Brunswick Records, which led to Jackie Wilson, the Shylights, Betty Everett, Billie Holiday, Louis Armstrong, and several others like Little Richard, who winded up getting on this record label after MGM established the black side of Brunswick Records. But the Caucasian side of it was more like Frank Sinatra, etc., and people like that. He was one of the biggest stores on Brunswick Records during that time on the white side of Brunswick. And so it's just a matter of the fact that we never received royalties until after my father died, and primarily because one or two things. Brunswick was also involved with organized crime. It was a guy by the name of Simon D. Calavanti, nicknamed Sam, of the D. Calavanti, New Jersey organized crime family, who wind up doing a lot of a business takeover, and they basically wind up managing the record company's finances after Nathan Trainapole got loans toward the actual catalog rights of some of the black artists like the Shylights, Jackie Wilson, etc. He took out loans with the New Jersey crime family against these artists rights. And so I think that's pretty much what happened. I'm not 100% certain, but I'm pretty much, that's what I was told by some people who my dad overhearing my dad speaking with my mother. And so the New Jersey crime family wound up getting a lot of control over the black artists. And due to the fact that it was due to the racial time frame, the civil rights era time frame that was, along with the fact that they felt like, hey, we're backed up by organized crime, we don't have to pay them anything, and we're not going to respect these black entertainers. So it led to, after my dad dying homeless and destitute, and it also led to Marshall Thompson getting involved with organized crime himself from the Chi-Lites. He winded up doing a lot of drug dealing, and he was involved with drugs. He was smuggling drugs for the actual New Jersey organized crime family. That's the thing. He was actually smuggling drugs for the New Jersey crime family. And so the New Jersey organized crime family used a lot of the artists and the more bigger artists like the Chi-Lites, etc., and Jackie. They used those people to sometimes smuggle drugs. They would actually smuggle drugs throughout the tours from Europe to the United States and Mexico, et cetera, in Asia. They would actually smuggle drugs like that during the tour. So it was a lot of manipulation and corruption and abuse. The black artist has never really received not 1 cent of royalties. And up until the day my father died, he never received not 1 cent of royalties. And as I mentioned, he died homeless and destitute. I asked my mom after the remake of the MC Hammer record remake of Have You Seen Her? I asked her to do an investigation about the royalty theft of Brunswick Records, and I suggested that she go to the media because they had only gave her $150 for all of us from the royalties of the Chi-Lites remake of Have You Seen Her, and Mary J. Blige, and who else was doing that back then? Big Daddy Kane had remade our songs, and Public Enemy had remade our songs, and it was quite a few other different artists who had made, and UB40 and Paul Young also remade the Chi-Lites, and so the record company's response was to only give $150.
Wow.
And so, right, and so that's when I urged my mom to go to the NBC and Fox News. And they had, I remember seeing Marshall Thompson and Paul, and Nathan Trainapole pay off the actual NBC. I'm not going to mention any particular television network, but I remember seeing them pay off several different television and radio, networks in order to prevent them from being able to to investigate. And it was actually over $10.5 million that was paid off to the actual FBI agent who actually got involved in this after Jackie Wilson had gotten basically a report from they did what you call a well report. I think it's called a welfare report or something like this. He was reported to the Inspector General's office. It had gotten to the Inspector General's office that Brunswick Records was basically embezzling and defrauding the black artists on its label and using abusive tactics to Jackie Wilson and the Chi-Lites and my dad, Creole Jones, from the Chi-Lites. So what happened is the FBI wound up doing an investigation with the District Attorney's Office, U.S. District Attorney's Office, who winded up contacting the IRS as well. And basically the leader, I should say the actual head FBI investigator, the head person that was doing the investigation over the Brunswick Records and Chi-Lites and tax evasion issue. I wound up seeing this guy come over our house along with Marshall Thompson, Paul and Nathan Trainapole, and the other Chi-Lite members, Robert Lester, Eugene Records, and Robert Lester. Well, they wind up having a meeting over the house with my dad and mother, and basically saying the FBI agent said that he wanted them to pay him $3.5 million, and he would drop all the case. He would make sure that none of the evidence ever reached the court. And then the judge also wind up getting another $3.5 million as well. And then the IRS wind up banging on our door one day and saying, hey, we got you under recording along with the FBI, who, we've had you under surveillance for such and such and such amount of time. We found out that Brunswick Records has been hiding money and embezzling money. If you guys don't, cooperate, we will use this as a way to throw you underneath prison. You'll never see the light of day. And then they said, well, they demanded to have, I think it was $2.5 or $3.5 million. The IRS as well as the FBI. So altogether it was about $10 million to $10.5 million that was paid, including the jury that resided over the investigation of Brunswick Records in the trial. And I think it was in 1978, somewhere around there, to 1982.
Okay.
What I seen was around 1981, 82.
Okay. Well, it's definitely been documented. Brunswick Records had their share of legal issues and stuff. But I feel as though it's a flagrant example of the reprehensible attitude of some of these people that, when we think about the R&B and soul early eras and artists coming in from Jackie Wilson to the Shy Lights, as you mentioned, really helped shape things in the 50s and, well into the 70s and stuff like that for a part of, that record label. And when you think, a lot of people have done the knowledge on it and seen that some of these old labels started off from the bootlegging business, from the gangster businesses and stuff like that, from organized crime and stuff as well. So it is absolutely believable that they would use, unscrupulous tactics, especially in those eras. And when I think it's a great point that you made, highlighting that they were signing artists and stuff to deals, for example, before people had rights and, rights in society and stuff like that. So it kind of exemplifies and gives an example that for the most part, we're looking at exploitation as opposed to, giving people their fair dues and what's rightfully owed to them. Another point that you touched on, which I thought was quite interesting, because we were just talking about, some of the works and stuff that had been replicated and stuff and how important it is. One thing we always talk about, ownership and being able to control what we create and stuff. We've seen artists, like you said, like from MC Hammer to Jay-Z go on and sample works. Now, you did mention that there was a point where you had tried to broker something with Jay-Z. Could you speak on that?
Well, yes. What happened? Thank you for asking that question. Yeah. See, what happened is that my mom and I and my two sisters, I used to help. My mom wanted me to help her manage the royalties and so forth that we were receiving from our father, from the Shy Lights, Creedell Jones, and so. It got to the point after going back and forth to the NBC and media and begging for investigations to be done. The media would always take bribes on the side, and they never would allow us to even have an investigation. It got to the point where my mother and I just said, well, why don't we just sell the catalog rights that we own from the royalties, and then we can go into the real estate business. And my mom wanted to have her own magazine and go into real estate. So I said, well, okay, why don't we do that? And so it led to me going to New York. Also, and I wanted to say, well, Mom, if we're going to keep the royalties, and we're going to keep, receiving the catalog royalties, but being cheated like this, we're going to have to sue this record label. And so my mom didn't have the money she lived in St. Louis, Missouri, so she didn't have the money to come out because she was a teacher at that time, and she didn't really have the money to move all the way to New York and sue the record label. So I was 21 years old, so I decided to come out, and I said, well, I'll volunteer and go out there and I'll sue them for us. I'll file a lawsuit in court and stay out there and try to handle the suit for us and keep you informed on what's going on. You can come out, when it's time to go to court, we'll all come out and testify in court against this record label. So I also suggested to my mom to send all the sales statements from the royalties to the FBI and the IRS Criminal Investigation Unit as well, not just me go out and do this on my own for my family. So I was trying to get the legal backing of the federal government as well as taking it upon myself at 21 to try to file a lawsuit against the record company. And I was the only son from my father or any son from the Shielites whatsoever to ever file a lawsuit against Brunswick Records. And that was around 2001, I believe that was. And 2001, 2002 it was. It was a $25 million lawsuit. But I had to drop that lawsuit because of the fact that I didn't have money to be able to even, to be able to hire an attorney, although I went to attorneys' offices to try to get legal representation. But me only being 21 and an African-American young man, they were unwilling to take it as a probate. And also the fact that because I was black and being exploited, I didn't have the money to put up front for the attorney. So the lawsuit wound up being dropped, the $25 million lawsuit I filed. I did go to B.B. King, and I went to, my mom went to Oprah Winfrey Studios, directly to her studio in Chicago, at least 3 or 4 different times. She went to Oprah Winfrey Studio and literally, begged and pleaded for Oprah to listen to her, to give her opportunity to explain what was going on to the Shielites and to our family from the Shielites. But Oprah refused to let her get through the front gate. And they would not let her through this front security gate. So it resulted into, her coming back home. She said, well, Oprah wouldn't even help me with a bus ticket back home. So that just infuriated me. So I just, again, I told my mom, I asked my mom, why don't we just sell the catalog rights? So make a long story short, this is how I met Jay-Z. I met Jay-Z because of the fact I was in New York. I had filed a lawsuit. I was actually homeless out there at that time because I was about 21, and I was homeless at the same time. So what happened is I was staying at a homeless shelter because I was only 21. I was getting disability, matter of fact, and trying to go to college and get an apartment, but I had just got out there. And so what happened is once a guy that I knew that was at that shelter, he says, why don't you go to the record company, Rockefeller Records? Jay-Z would be interested in buying, your catalog rights from your father, from the Shielites. So I said, that does sound like a good idea, because I had already had business proposals typed up to go to B.B. King and other entertainers. I went to Diana Ross's condo in New York and dropped the actual business proposal for the catalog royalties rights that we owned to be sold off to one of the artists that we hoped that were black, that would be interested in helping our family and taking over and being able to sue the company with the means that they had, because we sure didn't. They kept us in such poverty we couldn't even barely see straight. So I went to Diana Ross's condo out there and left the business proposal for her. I left one for B.B. King. I left one for Russell Simmons at Def Jam Records. And while I actually was going to Russell Simmons' office in Def Jam Records, I didn't even know that Jay-Z had an office in that same building. I didn't know his record company was in the same building as Def Jam Records. So here comes, as I was there, and because I didn't know where his office was, but he came walking out of the record company of Def Jam Records, and history made itself. So I wind up talking to Jay-Z, and I had already had a business proposal already typed up for him anyway, and I gave it to him. And I said, would you be interested in helping me and my mother and family and my father and our family from the Shielites basically by buying our royalty catalog rights that we have from my father, Creedell Jones, who died homeless and destituted after being a legendary musician for the Shielites. He died homeless, and it would definitely help me and my mother and 2 sisters if you would be interested in helping us by buying this catalog rights that we owned from the Shielites. And because they're worth millions, but we don't have the money to be able to get an attorney and sue this record company on our own. So it was more like, it was kind of a luck of coincidence. And so I had asked my mom before I typed it up. I said, "Well, how much do you want me to sell the catalog rights on the business proposal for?" And she says $375,000. I tried to tell her, I said, "Mom, it's worth at least over $1 million." And she says, "Well, I'm not sure if any entertainers would be paying $1 million for our catalog rights." And it was kind of funny, but because she didn't know anything about the money side of the music industry at all, even though she was married to my father since 1978 and stayed married until 94, until his death. You know, she was from the era where the women didn't really ask questions too much about the money and you know, the money business side of the industry of their husbands. So I did that. And Jay-Z said, "Yeah, I'll be interested in buying the catalog rights." He said, "Yeah, that's something I'm interested in doing." He and Damon Dash was with one another. They went outside, and then I think Cameron came out after them, and he was going to a record concert promotion that he was doing with Cameron and Ludacris and Damon Dash. And as I gave him the business proposal, he said, "Yeah, I'll be in contact with you." Then I told him I left the number of the attorney and my number and my mother's number on there. Contact us. So, make a long story short, he contacted Brunswick Records, the very record company that had been exploiting us, and the very record label that left my mother homeless, and not homeless, but she died in such poverty she couldn't afford her own funeral. And the record company cheated her out of her funeral expenses, which they were supposed to give $10,000 advancement out of the Beyonce and Jay-Z remake towards the funeral of my mother after she died in a coma, after being in a coma for 3-4 months straight. So after she died in a coma from being a diabetic and all the stress and abuse, from the abuse and complications of dealing with this stress and the racism that we faced, with dealing with the estate and royalty exploitation, you know, of our legacy from the Shy Lights, it was too much for her. So she wound up getting into a coma, and staying in there for 3 months or so. And I flew to St. Louis from New York. Actually, I took an Amtrak from St. Louis to New York, and where my mom was at the corner of Glennis Hospital. And you know, this was during the time of the Jay-Z royalty deal, contractual deal that they did to buy the 2 songs that my father led on. One song my father led on, which was "Or You My Woman," that Beyonce remade by the name of "Got Me Going So Crazy Right Now." That was the song he led on, which was called, originally titled Or You My Woman, written by Eugene Records, and my dad. So the thing of that is, and so they just totally took advantage of the whole situation. And Brunswick Records claimed that Jay-Z never paid them the $375,000 along with Beyonce. And so he said, "Well, we're waiting on the check, but we can give you an advancement for her funeral for $10,000. And so I was kind of happy that at least we get that for her funeral. So I drove my 2 sisters to pick up the money, and then come along to find out it was the same $2,600 that they would always send, following the media press that we constantly we would have to consistently put media press on them in order for them to send even that much out. But when they did, it would be like $2,500 to $2,600 in a year. And my mother did not even know that they were supposed to get royalties twice a year. You get royalties twice a year, not once a year. And so it was through the investigation that I did that I found out royalties payments were actually supposed to be paid twice. And the attorney, Jay Ross, would tell us, "Oh, you only get royalties once a year, $2,500 a year." And I just knew they were just exploiting so bad, you know. So when we got there to the Western Union, it was $2,600, and I was furious because he told me it would be $10,000. I said, "Well, this is the same $2,600, as if Beyonce just did not get a double diamond record from the remake of my father's song. I mean, because Beyonce received a double diamond from that record."
Crazy in Love, that song. Yeah.
Within the first 2 months.
Yeah, it was a huge record, man. Crazy in Love and stuff. And I remember, you know, you said this was 2001. You said you came with that proposal, and it's a shame that they went on to do business, I guess, directly with the label and stuff, and sort of cut you guys out in a sense. Now, when we look at labels, they're definitely not shy of, I guess, cheating and exploiting people, especially when it comes to royalties and stuff. We've had other people within the industry say that it's a good thing to audit these guys as much as possible and stuff, and but in your experience, it's been documented that there's been other unscrupulous tactics, including like usage of funds and trust funds and stuff, and hiding money in different places and stuff. Is that something that you can speak on?
Tens of millions of dollars, yes. Just to elaborate on that trust fund issue, this is what happened. My dad established trust funds for us when I was about 5 years old. After the concert in 1981-82, my dad acquired about $5 million from the royalties, not from the royalties because he wasn't receiving any royalties, but from the concert performances that they did worldwide. The Shy Lights had received $30 million. His percentage of that $30 million was around $5 million, and that $5 million, Marshall Thompson from the Shy Lights had urged, along with Nathan Trainapole from the Brunswick Records, they had urged my father to actually invest and to put the money into child trust accounts in order to protect the money from being investigated and being taken by the IRS for back taxes. Okay? So it was like a tax shelter, along with making sure he provided for us along with it, but he also used it also as a tax shield shelter to protect his money from being taken by back taxes. And so after Brunswick Records and Nathan Trainapole and Marshall Thompson from the Shy Lights urged my dad to do that, he agreed along with my mother. So he put up about $850,000 for me and my two sisters, all in total for his children outside of my mom's marriage with him. It was a total of about $3.5 million that he put up, and he kept about $1 million in cash and a little over $1 million in cash. And it's a sad, crazy story that wound up happening. My father's sister named Margie Jones and his other sister named Mevelina Jones, and my mother's sister named Regina Jones Regina Dixon, Regina Cheryl Dixon from St. Louis, but she lives in Oklahoma City right now. So Regina Dixon had winded up basically being told and doing a deal with Marshall Thompson, which Marshall had basically instructed my Aunt Regina and my Aunt Margie to help him embezzle all of the $3.5 million that my father put up for me and my two sisters and my half brothers. And me and my two sisters received $300,000, and my sister Trinell and Tamiko received $250,000 each. That was put into a child trust account, 3 separate different child trust accounts. Each child had a separate trust account in Bank of America. In total, it was $3.5 million. But for me and my two sisters, by my mother, which is his wife, Deborah Jones, I had $300,000. My sisters Trinell and Tamiko had $250,000 each. So it was a total of about $800,000 to $850,000 that was put up for me and my two sisters Trinell and Tamiko in Bank of America around 1980, 81, 82. And I am still looking for anybody. By the way, I'm still looking for anybody that knows anything about these trust accounts, or anyone who knows or can help investigate the whereabouts of where these trust funds are at today. But the trust accounts were put up, and so Marshall Thompson, I guess it was too much of a tempting type of an issue, a temptation for Marshall, than to know that my dad had that much money in accounts for his children. So Marshall decided to take advantage of my dad by asking my father's sister Margie and Mevelina to help him embezzle those trust accounts. And he asked my aunt Regina Dixon, Cheryl Dixon, to actually aid him into actually obtaining the trust accounts by stealing them from my mother and father's house. And so Regina waited until my dad and mother went out for dinner, and left us with the babysitter in St. Louis, Missouri, at our house on Caroline Avenue in St. Louis, Missouri. And what happened is that Marshall instructed Regina to basically wait till the babysitter was there, and that my mother and father was gone, and then come in the house. So they knocked on the door and just basically them. I guess you call it. They how you say it? They basically bored through the house. She ran into the bedroom where she knew that my mother kept a lot of her jewelry and so forth, and money and so forth. And she went straight to looking through the cabinet. She wound up finding the actual lockbox where my father and mother put those trust accounts at in their bedroom, right? Because it was in the closet. And so she got the $3.5 million in trust funds out of the lockbox. My mom kept, along with my dad, they kept about a little over $1 million out of that money underneath the mattress of their bed. It was over $1 million underneath the mattress of the bed. And my aunt Regina wound up taking a black trash bag, hefty trash bag, and stuffing it full of over $1 million. That was under the mattress that was in my mother's and father's bedroom at the house in Caroline. So she lifted the mattress. Her and her husband lifted the mattress up. Her husband's name is Larry Dixon, and they grabbed the $1 million+ that was under the mattress. They grabbed the $3.5 million in trust fund documents, and they also took several Rolexes and gold and diamond rings and so forth that my father and mother had in their bedroom. So what happened is she pretty much got us for over $4.5 million, $1 million in cash, the $3.5 million in child trust accounts and jewelry. So what wound up happening from there, I seen her go into the hallway after she took all the money and put it in a hefty bag and the documents. And she used our phone that we had in the hallway of our house to call Marshall Thompson and asked him from the sidelights. She asked Marshall from the sidelights, what should she do with the trust fund documents now? Because she's gotten a hold of the documents. What does he want her to do with it? He told, and I remember hearing and seeing Marshall talking to her. I saw her talking to Marshall, and I heard Marshall on the phone as they were talking. And she said, what I want you to do is I want you to white out. He said, look through the drawers and get some white out, and white out Creedell Jones's name from the trust fund, from the trusteeship, and then white out Deborah Jones, his wife's name, from the trusteeship. And then I want you to write my name in place of his name, write Marshall Thompson's name in place of my father's name, Creedell Jones, and then write her name, which is Regina Cheryl Dixon, in place of my mother's name after she whites out both of their names. With white out. And so I basically seen her do this. And she put a fan. She wound up cooking an electric fan up, and to try to make, to try to dry it out so she can write the names on there. And I was so young when the trust funds were established, till I couldn't even write my name on the trust document when you're supposed to sign it. I couldn't write my name on it because I didn't even know how to write. I was only 5 years old, so they told me, my sister and mother, to help me put an X there in my name. So they very well could have put someone else's name there, because there's only an X that marks my name on there.
Yeah, well, I mean, no, I get you. You mentioned earlier that former, Shylights member Marshall Thompson had, got into some sort of criminality and stuff, and it was reported that he was arrested by the FBI in 2001 for theft, bribery, and payola. So, it's definitely crazy hearing how, the exploitation and the cheating and stuff like that's been going on. So you reported that there was a Bank of America trust fund in 2005. It was reportedly holding the amount of $875,000 by the bank manager Troy Gardner, which it said stayed dormant since 1981. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. That's right. That's exactly right. Yes, sir. Troy Gardner worked at the 6300 block of Sunset Boulevard at the Bank of America on Sunset Avenue at 6300 Sunset Boulevard. This happened due to the fact that the IRS had been contacted about Marshall Thompson and Brunswick Records embezzlement and defaultment and tax evasion and the royalty theft that they were doing to my dad from the Shylights and my mother. And they were contacted. And so they wound up doing an investigation, the IRS Criminal Financial Investigation Division of the U.S. IRS U.S. Treasury Division here in the United States. They wind up doing an investigation on Brunswick Records and Marshall Thompson, primarily on Marshall Thompson. And it was around 2001 when they started to investigate. The information that I gave you about my mom, I asked her to go to the FBI and the IRS and turn them over for royalty theft and embezzlement. I'm sure she did that. I'm sure she did that. And I also I'll take responsibility as well for notifying the IRS about Marshall Thompson and the record company's theft when it comes to the royalties embezzlement of the Shylights. So what happened from that point is I asked for an investigation to be done. I didn't even know they were doing an investigation. I just assumed that they blew me off like the media did. So to my surprise, that they had done the investigation since 2001 up into 2005. And so what happened is the Federal Investigation, IRS, Federal Criminal Financial Crimes Division, the IRS division, started in 2001, and they ended the investigation in 2005 against Marshall Thompson and Brunswick Records, only to find out that he did commit tax evasion and royalty theft. And because of that, they had froze Marshall Thompson's bank account, who at the time, Marshall Thompson, he banked at Bank of America and Chase Bank. He banked at Bank of America and Chase Bank. And so the reason why I was able to find my trust account at that time is because the IRS criminal investigation froze all of his power and authority over his own account was frozen. And not only was it frozen, his illegal trusteeship that he had priorly asked my aunt to help him forge, his illegal trustee control was also frozen because of the IRS's investigation. And so that allowed the Bank of America's manager named Troy Gardner to be able to spot my account once I went in there and showed my ID and Social Security card. He was able to spot the actual trust fund account because of the IRS's freezing of the control that Marshall Thompson had over his own account. So all of the financial duties and powers that Marshall had over the trust funds, as well as over his own personal accounts, were frozen by the IRS. So when I went in there, they said, "Oh, you have a trust fund for $875,000." You see, and it was because of the fact that whatever Marshall Thompson had put on there to actually cover the trust fund up, because he had hidden that trust fund in a manner that even if I went to the Bank of America, they would not have told me that I have an account there. It wasn't until the IRS actually froze his bank account and his power of trusteeship that he illegally took by forgery. After they froze his account is when I was able to find out about my trust account by Troy Gardner, who can testify. If anyone knows Troy Gardner out there, he's from Los Angeles, California. He worked at 6300 Sunset Boulevard in Hollywood, California, at the Bank of America on Sunset Avenue, the 6300 block location of Sunset Boulevard. So, he can even testify. I spoke to Troy Gardner shortly after that, and Troy Gardner did say that he remembered talking to me. He remembered showing me the account, but he told me when I was there, he said, "You can't." When he showed me the trust fund account, he actually turned the screen to me and said, "This is, do you know you have a trust fund account? It's under your name, birthday, and Social Security number." He said it's for $875,000. And he actually said, "Let me get a copy of this, so I want to make a printout of this so I can show it to you." So he went behind the desk of the clerk's office, the actual cashier's office, where you have a supervising manager, and he actually got a copy from the supervising manager's office printout, came out and showed me, and it was under my name, birth date, and social security number, $875,000. And not only that, Marshall, then he told me, then Troy Gordner, the bank manager, told me, and he says, the bank manager from Sunset Boulevard, Bank of America, he says, you can't walk out of the office, out of the bank with this document. We can't let you walk out of the bank with the document because it's two other people on this account as trustees. He said, Darren Cubie, you are the beneficiary of this trust fund, but there are two other trustees that are on here. Now, the only person that is authorized or that is legally able to get the money out as a beneficiary is me. But there's two other trustees on here that are supposed to be the administrating trustee. Marshall was supposed to contact me and my two sisters and my father's children, who you've seen on Fraternity Court television show, and tell all of us about the trust funds that we all have in Bank of America that our father put up for us. So Marshall refused to do the duty of contacting any of us and letting us know that we had any trust funds at all. He was actually trying to embezzle all of the money. As I said, my aunt had even attempted to drown me once the trust funds were established in around 1982, 82. My aunt had asked a meeting with my mother and my mother and my father, Creedell Jones from Satellites, and she says, how are we going to get Darren's trust funds out now? And then my mom said, well, I talked to the attorney who opened the trust account for us, for my kids, for Darren, and he said the only way we can get it out is that he has to die of an accidental death or be declared mentally incompetent. And then he says, if I don't die of an accidental death or be declared mentally incompetent, the money has to go to me. And so my aunt replied to my mother and father was that, well, if you don't have the guts to kill Darren, I will. So she told me to go to the actual bathroom where she turned the bathtub up. She turned the water all the way up in the bathtub and basically all the way up to the rim and to pick me up and held me in the tub with my shorts and t-shirt on until I drowned to death. And I literally drowned to death in order for her to steal and embezzle the trust funds. So this kind of led up to the situation with not only them trying to hide my trust fund after that attempted murder that she didn't work. She basically, my mother actually disowned her and argued with her after that and said she'll never talk to her again. But when my mother realized that the only person who had those trust documents were Regina and Marshall Thompson, her sister Regina Dixon and Marshall Thompson and Margie Jones, when she found that out, she felt like she had no other choice but to play ball in order to get the money out of her children's trust account. So this led to my mother contacting my Aunt Regina again once I turned about 9 years old. From the attempt of drowning at the age of 5, she wound up not talking to her for about 4 or 5 more years. And finally she called her back and said, let's talk about this, what happened to my children's trust accounts. And we had, so Regina decided to come over our house. She lived in Oklahoma. We lived in St. Louis. So she decided to come over our house take a trip from Oklahoma to Chicago. To St. Louis. So when she came to our house, come to find out, she told my mother again she suggested to my mother that she tried to use poison me in order to take over my trust fund again. So she told my mother, she says, if you give him rat poison and arsenic in his oatmeal, in his food, you will, he can, pretty much die from poisoning without anybody knowing it, and we could take over the trust fund from there. And then prior to that, and prior to the drowning, I seen Regina and Marshall tell my father's sister and brother, named Margie and Mevelina and Kenneth. Well, he told them to put LSD and PCP into my father's drinks, right? where basically, in order, I guess they were trying to declare him, schizophrenic or something like that. So what happened is, I seen Marshall Thompson instruct Regina and Mevelina and Margie to put PCP inside of my father's drinks while they were over the home, while they were over our house visiting us. They would kind of go to the bar because we had an entertainment bar and downstairs in the entertainment room. And what happened was, Marshall told them to slip. They poured out like a little oil bottle, one of those little glass oil incense bottles, almost like those little glass incense bottles. And it had some clear liquid in it. It looked like PCP or LSD. And so they put it inside of his drinks. They said, well, Credell, let us make you a drink. Let us make you a drink. They always would ask my dad to let them make them drinks. Let them make him drinks, I should say. And so it was during that time where they basically would slip this little bottle of PCP looking liquid inside of his drinks, and I've seen them do this at least a half a dozen times or so. And then on several of those occasions, I've seen after they put the PCP inside of his drink, they would call the ambulance and say, "Oh, he's going into a schizophrenic episode." And so they were trying to declare him incompetent. So one day, me and my mother, they did the very same thing I said. My dad wound up going to the hospital because of that. They called the ambulance and said he was going into an episode. And so when we got to the hospital to visit my dad, we drove right behind the ambulance, and the doctor wound up doing a blood toxicology on my dad while he was alive. And he said, how did he get, 10 times the level of PCP and LSD in his blood system? How did he get 10 times the level of PCP in his blood system? And then my mother said, well, she don't know how he got it. And make a long story short, I had seen them put my dad in Malcolm Bliss Hospital in St. Louis, Missouri. And I seen Marshall Thompson come down there because it was me and my mother and two sisters and Marshall and I think Robert Lester and Eugene Records from the Skylights had came to visit my dad. And I seen while we were leaving out of the hospital, going to our car, I seen Marshall Thompson pull up, and he gave the doctor, psychiatrist that was seeing over my dad, he gave him a brown paper bag full of money, right in front of my mother. And he said, I want you to declare him, mentally ill or schizophrenic or something like this. I want you to declare him mentally incompetent, he said. So I kind of feel like after my mom and dad's separation, I feel like they kind of drove that Marshall wanted to drive my mother and father. He wanted to drive them into basically he wanted to split them up so that he would be able to control those children's trust accounts and be able to also control my dad as well.
Yeah, no, I get you. And, it's crazy when we think of the lengths and the extremities that people will go to, especially for money and for power and stuff like that. With that being said, how can people help you or support you, and in your mission to going forward?
Okay, yes. I'm glad you mentioned that. I have a GoFundMe account right now. And it's created to help raise money for the situation, and to try to get attorneys and investigations onto the theft and exploitation of the trust funds. So, and I also want to do a documentary to help expose these stories and my story and my father and mother's story involving the exploitation of our family and other artists like Jackie Wilson. So what you can do is you can go to the GoFundMe. I have a GoFundMe site. It's called Please Help Support the Shylights Family. And you can go there and let me see. If you type in Please Help Support the Shylights Family, you can actually see it on the GoFundMe site there.
Okay. Yeah, we can We can definitely put a link to that in the description. And I mean, lastly, before we wind down, because we definitely gonna reconnect, but I think you've definitely dropped a lot of powerful information for people to digest, and ways that they can connect with you. But going forward, for somebody that's seen so much and experienced so much and stuff as well, what advice would you give to others out there, just in the struggle, or even just in the business or in the industry and stuff like that?
Well, I'll tell you the truth. The music industry, well, the entertainment industry in general. I was an actor. I was a background actor myself. So I love acting in the Hollywood industry, like most of you guys who like the entertainment industry. The entertainment industry can be a very good and happy, wonderful experience, but there are definitely predators and definitely people who are 100% sit out and intentionally put out exploitation to try to they want to actually exploit many of the young actors and singers that are coming out today. They kind of thrive on the desperation of these young entertainers and the fact that they're not really necessarily concentrated on the business side of the industry, and they kind of primarily are just so excited about becoming a musician and being established as a new young artist out here, or actor or artist out here, musician out here, and they don't really focus on the practicality of the business sense behind the music industry. I would tell them that think of the entertainment industry as a business, not just I like music, I like television, I like to act, or I like to dance and sing. This is a business. This is not just an opportunity to express your talent as an entertainer or a musician. I love the music industry. I do love to sing, and I love to act. That's one of my favorite things to do. But in all truth, I do think that it's very important that the mind state of being associated with business orientation is 100% the main mind state you're on, because there's nothing wrong with having fun in the industry, but if you don't have nothing to show for what you've done and earned, like my father, who's been in the music industry since 1968 up until his death in 1994, and he has a store on Hollywood Walk of Fame with his music group, and they're in so many different abductions and Hall of Fame, Music Hall of Fame, Vocal Group Hall of Fame, Soul Training Hall of Fame, etc. They still have been exploited, and many of them die without a dime. So I don't want to see any entertainer or young artist out here making the same mistakes that my dad made, which was to not necessarily focus on the music industry. But I think he really did the best that he truly could, along with my mother. He was just a victim of being an African-American person at the wrong time of history. It wasn't, because every artist back in them days got exploited that were black back in the 60s and 70s. Whether they had all the knowledge in the world, it wouldn't make a difference, because it was a racial environment, and the civil rights of black people back then were threatened all around the board. So the people today have an opportunity to get some education. I would tell them to go to college. If you can, I would tell them to go at least 2 years in college. I'm not telling them to put their career aside in the music or entertainment industry. I'm telling them I think it's more advisable for them to go to college, whether that's online, as they get do their auditions, and as they build their careers. They should be exploring education at the same time, at least get an associate's degree, so that you have the basis understanding of what these entertainers, these crooked record labels do to these people. And I also would tell them to get a good attorney. And I would tell them to actually try to create your own record label, truthfully. I mean, you don't need these big record labels to actually promote you. The only thing they're going to do, because I'm writing a book myself right now, and I'm dealing with the same thing. So the only thing these people are truly going to do is be able to advertise and market you right. They can internationally market your name and your image on your music or your career, but they will never pay you what you really are owed in that industry. It is not until you initially take the initiative to be a full, ongoing manager and operator of your own name and image. You have to look at yourself as if you're a business. Your name is a business. Your face is a business. Your image and your character is a business. And so everything is about understanding that you are considered a corporation, and to incorporate yourself, one of the main smartest things to do is to incorporate your name. You know, it only costs $65 to $75 to do a self-incorporation of your own image, trademark. I think it's $350 to $275 for a trademark. So I would tell them to trademark themselves, trademark an image of themselves. Let their face be their trademark. And also, I would tell them to invest in definitely trademarking and incorporating themselves as an incorporation, as an entity, a business, a corporate entity, so that nobody really owns your likeness. Like Prince had this problem before. A lot of other artists had these same issues. And I would say the way to best protect yourself is to trademark your image and also incorporate your name, whether that's a group like the Chi-Lites or whether that's an individual like Michael Jackson or Prince. Self-incorporation and trademarking is the key. Before you get yourself into anything, remember, you're going to put yourself in a position of potentially making millions of dollars, and without self-incorporation, without incorporating your name and incorporating and trademarking your image, you're potentially likely to be exploited by a lot of white racist record labels who really don't have any concern toward black legendary entertainers. So you have to have more concern about yourself and incorporate your name and trademark your image. And for all those who are listening to me, if you guys can help me out, because I feel as though I was a victim along with my father, who, was a very educated man. My mother was a teacher. So my mother has a college degree and almost 2 college degrees, and my father was a high school graduate and also a college major. So he was exploited. So, if you guys can help me out by helping me, I can teach other people how to protect themselves. And I appreciate everyone's cooperation and listening to this. And your time is valuable. And I thank you for your time of listening to me. But I would definitely advise all of you guys to incorporate yourselves, incorporate the name of your group or the individual name of yourself or your trade name, and also to copyright your own songs and music. And also, I would also tell you to create your own trademark and do the trademark, the copyrights, and the incorporation of your name or trade name.
Okay, most definitely.
And when you own those things, it's very, very, very hard for anybody to exploit you after that.
No, well, we appreciate that, because one thing we definitely want to focus on is mastery and ownership, especially of works that are created by our people. Oftentimes throughout history, it's evident that we see others have came in and invaded and manipulated and usurped titles, powers, and positions where necessary. But we want to say continue to keep fighting the good fight. We're definitely going to support you. We'll put the link to your GoFundMe in the description and stuff, and keep the people abreast of your upcoming endeavors and stuff. Now, we definitely want to appreciate your time and stuff, and we celebrate the accomplishments.
Thank you. I appreciate your time more than anything. You are a blessing to all of us, especially to me. And we, as families of legendary black entertainers, we are excited about anyone who's willing, who individuals who have the humanity and decency to take the time and hear our side of the story and give us a chance to explain what so many people misconstrue. So I just thank you to the bottom of my heart. I thank you so much.
Nah, I appreciate that, my brother. And like we said, hopefully we can expound this into more and delve into more of this, because it's a complex situation, but it's something that's plagued a lot of us. And if it affects one of us, it affects a lot of us. And whatever we can do to help shed light and definitely especially make things better for the next generation and stuff. Because like you said, we've seen Prince, we've seen Michael Jackson, we've seen so many others and countless, especially have our own people go through it and stuff, and their families come forward and stuff, while we've seen others profiteer and be able to send their kids to
like
college.
Black Rob, who recently died. Yeah,
Black Rob recently in hip-hop too, and we represent a hip-hop union and stuff too. So definitely we'll stay connected, and we appreciate you stopping by and just dropping this message for the family and stuff as well, man.
Okay, but be sure to get the link to the GoFundMe, and I appreciate it so much. It's my pleasure to be able to talk to you, and feel free anytime we can do it again. Let me know.
Much love, my bro. Peace, family. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and check us out on BoutThatOnline.com. Don't forget to check us out on Facebook for exclusive playlists and social media for all different types of segments and content.